Results for last week's presidential election in Afghanistan show incumbent Hamid Karzai has a narrow lead over his main rival Abdullah. So far, just 10% of the ballots have been counted. Karzai's team is claiming victory, while Abdullah accuses the president's camp of rigging the vote. Final results are expected to be announced after mid-September. The election was marred by threats from the Taliban, which were blamed for keeping people away from ballot boxes. Well, now, for more on these partial results, we're joined live by Dina Gazowski in our Washington studio. Dina, over to you.
Hi there, Kerry. Well, we are also closely watching the elections in Afghanistan here in the United States, but poll numbers that don't really coincide with one another are making it increasingly difficult to predict who the winner will be. Now, the Bush administration was very close to Hamid Karzai, supporting him unconditionally, but the Obama administration seems to be keeping its distance. So, if Karzai does win, what could this mean for relations between the United States and Afghanistan? Well, joining me to discuss just that is Ivan Eland, Senior Fellow at the Independent Institute and Foreign Policy Expert. Thank you so much for being here. Now, many experts say that Karzai is just a puppet of the United States, specifically of the Bush administration. How different are relations between Karzai and the U.S. government, though, now that Barack Obama is in power?
Yeah, well, I don't think it would be accurate anymore to say that he's a puppet, because from day one, Obama and Biden seem to have a very low opinion of Karzai, that his government is corrupt, and that sort of thing. And I think the real problem here is that whoever wins is going to have to establish a government that's not perceived as being corrupt. The problem the U.S. had in Vietnam was that the South Vietnamese government never got legitimacy and was perceived by the Vietnamese people, and even in South Vietnam, as being corrupt. And I think that we have the same problem in Afghanistan. And in addition, in Vietnam, the government didn't control the whole of South Vietnam. And certainly the government of Afghanistan has the same problem, because Hamid Karzai is essentially the mayor of Kabul, because Afghanistan is very decentralized and is run by warlords, essentially.
So who does the United States want to see win in this case, then?
Well, I think they probably would like to see at least a good showing by Abdullah to keep Karzai honest. But I think Karzai will probably end up winning it one way or the other. Now, there have been allegations of fraud, massive fraud, and we may see something akin to the Iranian election if Abdullah doesn't win, because his supporters are threatening to go into the streets. So this could be like the election was in Iraq in 2005, in that the U.S. thought it was going to be good for the stability of the country, and in fact it wasn't. It was just the opposite. It reinforced sectarianism and ethno-sectarianism. And here I think you may have tensions between the ethnic groups, because of course one candidate is Tajik and the other one is Pashtun.
Right. Well, the U.S. military is also stepping up its efforts there in Afghanistan. And Hamid Karzai just recently came out and said that he feels that the United States needs to change its strategy over there. If Karzai wins and gains even more power, what does that mean for the U.S. effort there in that region?
Well, Karzai has been concerned about the U.S. killing civilians, too many civilians when they attack the Taliban. And so I think what it probably means would be that the U.S. shift even more to a strategy of protecting the population and not going after the Taliban as much, maybe even reaching a deal, because I think Karzai has been more willing than the United States has been to go with the Taliban. I think that might be the biggest thing. And I think the U.S. is willing to negotiate with some Taliban factions, but not others. They consider some of them just zealous people who won't negotiate. So I think there would be pressure from Karzai to negotiate more with the opponents in the war.
Well, I want to go back to another point that you made, that there may be protests if Karzai does win. Do you think that if it's going to be a reflection of something that happened in Iran, that the U.S. would get involved?
Well, that's a dilemma, I think, for the U.S., because they can either get involved and try to assure a fair election, or if they distance themselves, many people are going to think that they're, in bed with Karzai. That is to say, giving a blind eye to the fraud that went on. So the U.S. I don't know what the U.S. will do at this point about that particular issue, but it does present a dilemma for U.S. policy. Because, what do you do if there has been fraud? And it seems like there's been at least some fraud in the election.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and for your insight. As always, we will be watching the results very closely here in the United States. But for now, I want to throw it back to you in Moscow.
Yes, indeed. Dina Kozlowski live from Washington.